What is another woman's perspective of recovery?
All right, guys, let's review. If you haven't yet, jump over to iTunes, leave us a review. You can rate us, and it might be your review that we read on the next podcast. Love to hear from you. This one's called Not Even Married. It says, I love this podcast so much. I'm 19 years old, and this is my favorite podcast to listen to, though I am not married. So I have not gone through what some of you have. I do know what it's like to have someone do something to hurt your feelings. I did not grow up in a household of healthy relationships until this podcast. I wasn't sure how a relationship could function and how to strengthen one. After every episode I listen to, I find myself and my relationships to be stronger, better, and happier. Oh, that's so cool. At 19.
Dang.
I love that review.
Wow.
You know, it makes me think of, I had a cousin come up to me who hasn't been betrayed, but she's like, I love your podcast. It's changed our marriage. It's helped us so much. And just gets me thinking, like, you know, a 19-year-old who's not married, it's helping her. You know, if anyone's out there, you're listening to our podcast, it's branded very specific, obviously. But if you hear an episode that will help anybody, I believe our podcast is good for any marriage. So, yeah, share it, please.
Yeah. A lot of the recovery work we do and share is really basic marriage skills, right? That a lot of us weren't raised with and weren't aware of. So I agree. And thank you for that. I don't have many regrets, but I do wish I would have been more proactive at age 19 to say, hey, I need to get educated on what a healthy relationship looks like. So well done. All right. So I'm excited today because we have a special guest. We have Jessica with us, who has been finding her way into moving beyond betrayal and finding that hope of doing recovery for herself. And she's willing to come and share her own voice today with all of you, which is a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Vulnerable,
very vulnerable,
courageous,
and maybe a little nervous. And so I just want to first recognize and thank you for doing what you're doing today, so that so many other people can see there's no one way of doing this. And we all have such different stories, and yet we all kind of feel very similar in the same. So thank you for helping others feel not alone today.
Okay, should we just fire away?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Jessica, why don't you give us a little bit of background, just maybe a little bit of your story, and you know how, you know, what happened in terms of betrayal trauma and how you've come to kind of this point.
Well, I've been married for 17 years and together for 20 with my husband. He has been addicted to porn pretty much our entire marriage. He's had some success here and there, and then he would kind of relapse and go back to it. I didn't really discover the use until about year 5. And honestly, at that point, I was in the midst of raising young kids, and I just didn't know how to deal with it. So I just kind of buried it, shoved it under the rug, and he was okay with that. And we just kind of went on. And then about 2015, things started to get worse in that area as far as me noticing more of his usage of porn and discovering things on the computer, the tablet, his phone. And just, I started to realize how it was affecting me emotionally and physically. And so I confronted him, and, you know, things would be good for a while and we'd do really well, and we'd go to a marriage conference and we'd get on the same page and he'd have some success, and then he would relapse again. And fast forward to about April of this year during quarantine, you know, the fun quarantine that everybody's had to go through. I discovered yet again some photographs that he had been looking at, some pornography. And I was just devastated because I felt like we were in a good place, emotionally and physically and spiritually. I felt like we were on the same page, and so that really devastated me. And I kind of put my foot down of, I can't live like this anymore. And we've just kind of been on a journey ever since.
Thank you for that, Jessica. It hits home, I'm sure, with many more than just me hearing that, and the stirring up those feelings of something's off. And I know this
Yeah.
doesn't feel right, like pornography in general, like, yeah, that probably isn't a great thing. But I like how you said, I started to notice how it was affecting me. And I'm sure the relationship of disconnection, or that blow of feeling like, wait, I thought we were here and turns out we're here. That's a betrayal in itself, I feel like, where it's confusing, and we lose that trust of self and trust of partner. So I think for me, I would love to hear the feelings of numbing it out, pushing it away, pushing it down for so long, and that shift for you in finding that, hey, I don't want to live like this anymore. What was it for you that, did you feel a shift? Did you see something that you're like, okay, there's hope out there, or there is a name for something? What was it?
Well, I would say at the point of me discovering last April, I was just at the breaking point of something just snapped in me of, I can't do this anymore. This hurts too much. And as far as finding hope, I've just been on a long journey ever since then of searching out podcasts, finding you guys, finding other podcasts that talked about betrayal trauma, and that just learning about betrayal trauma has really opened my eyes to, I'm not crazy.
Mhm.
Because for the longest time, like, I would have a reaction physically to something, and like I thought there was something wrong with me, like I was sick, like I wasn't connecting the dots of what was happening. Like, I suffered with migraines for years, and now looking back, I realize it was from me stuffing down those emotions and that pain, because I can look back now and go, this happened and this happened, and then I had a horrible migraine. And so
So
it's just connecting the dots.
did you feel a little bit kind of crazy? Was there a lot of gaslighting or manipulating going on in your relationship, or was it all just kind of?
There was a lot of gaslighting. It was, it's no big deal, you're overreacting. In the very beginning, it was kind of like every guy does it, and
Mhm.
it's such a cultural norm. Pornography is such a cultural norm anymore, and it's so accepted that I kind of bought into that for the longest time of, it's not a big deal. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect him. It doesn't affect our relationship. And that just was a lie.
Mhm. And how'd you overcome that? I mean, because here it is, like, you're the crazy one, you're the one that needs to get over this, and you live that way for so long, but then you start getting these migraines. How do you finally put your foot down and say, I don't care if you think I'm the crazy one. I don't care if, like, this is not working for me and something needs to change. Was it that you were just in enough pain that it was time to address it on that level?
Well, we had some healing, in the last 4 or 5 years in this area. But for me, I had stuffed so much of the emotions and the pain. He was kind of at a point where it was hard for him to let me talk about it. And, he would be like, stop bringing it up. And, but that's what I needed in order to heal. But as far as like finally putting my foot down, and saying, I can't live like this anymore, I think it just came from a place of realizing I deserved more. I deserved to feel loved, and I wasn't feeling that way because of his addiction.
Mhm. I got questions. I could go on and on, but
Okay.
I want to give you guys a chance. Ash and Coby, do you got any questions?
Well, Jess, one of the questions that I have, Jessica, is how did your husband respond when this was it in April, did you say? Of
Yeah.
this year? When you finally said, okay, listen, I can't do this and I won't do this anymore. What's his response?
It was kind of all over the page. There was a lot of denial at first, and then he came around pretty quickly to realize that something needed to change, that I was serious. I had talked about, let's go see a counselor. Why don't you go see a counselor? Why don't I go see a counselor? Whatever we needed to do to work it out. And he's always kind of been against the whole counseling thing, the whole therapy thing, for his own reasons. And honestly, for me, it's scary too to go and talk to someone you don't know about your problems. And, but I felt like that could help us, but it wasn't something that he was willing to do.
So what do you think, Jessica, that finally got him to, how did he get to the place of acceptance of like, all right, I'm willing to do this?
Well, I don't know that he's to the point of he's ready to do this as far as traditional recovery, as far as a group and accountability and all of that, because honestly, we're not to that point yet. But he has made huge strides in honesty and letting me share and, being open to that. And we've had hard conversations and a lot of tears and all of that.
Okay. So what you're saying is he, despite like in the place that he's in right now, currently, he's been willing to listen to you and listen to the pain that you have felt. Is that what, am I hearing you
Yes.
correctly?
Yes, and he's been doing a lot of reading and studying on things of his own, um, of different traumas that he's had growing up and how that's affected him and how it's affected our marriage. And so he's growing in a lot of that part. But as far as like I said, the traditional recovery, we're not in that yet.
But that still
Like
counts,
I don't
though.
have a counselor, I don't have a therapist, I'm just kind of relying on you guys and different podcasts and things to
Well,
help. I mean,
it's
we listen to you guys together, and then it sparks a conversation, and that's been the most helpful.
It's awesome.
So
that's a huge deal. Yeah, you're totally welcome. I'm curious as to know what that's like for you, though. What does it feel like when he listens to you and you feel heard in your pain?
Oh, it's been life changing. It's really broken down a lot of walls that I had in the relationship because I had gotten to the point where I was tired of being hurt. And really for the longest time, it was hard for me to say, this happened and this happened and this is how it impacted me when you did this. It was really hard for me to open up and even confront that.
I just think what you're talking about is so critical for healing in a relationship, which is there's this God gave this silver lining, and it's this: the betrayed needs to process pain to heal. They need to step into it. They need to feel it. They need to talk about it. And oftentimes the addicted has a hard time because of their shame allowing that pain in the relationship. So that's when they turn the tables, they defend, they they go to fix it mode, they do all these things. But when the addicted shows the capacity to empathize, to hold space, two things happen. It actually supports her in her healing because she's processing her pain. She has somebody who's helping her explore it. But the second thing that it does is start to rebuild trust in the relationship, because now he's being a safe person who actually is showing up for me in a really vulnerable, intimate way. And it helps to rebuild that trust. So I love the smile that you had when Coby asked you that question and you said it's been life-changing. And
It has.
another point I want to make, and I'll shut up and let you talk some more, Jessica, but and this might sound contradictory to some of the things that we've said. I'm a big believer in specialized therapy. I've developed therapy group systems, programs. I'm a therapist myself. But, if a person goes and stands on their head every day and it changes their heart and makes them be an honest, empathetic, authentic person, that's healing. And they don't need to go to a CSAT specifically to work recovery. It's helpful. A good therapist will help them get there. But when you say he's not in recovery in the traditional sense, he might not be going to therapy consistently, but it sounds like he's really starting to engage into recovery. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that too, because there's so many books and podcasts and other things that talk so specifically about, he needs to see a specialized therapist, he needs to go see a counselor, he needs all these different things. And for the wife, if we see that he doesn't have that in place, it discourages us so much. I know for me personally, I would listen to something and read something that talked about that, and I would just be like, well, we're just never going to get there because he's against doing that. But at the same time, I have seen growth and, changes in our relationship.
And you've felt humility from him.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so I love all of the things that you're saying. I think our listeners are definitely resonating with what you're saying, because I know it's more common to be where you're at than to say, hey, we're doing this together, right? That's just not the most common way. So you're normal. We all
Totally
are.
normal.
But what I love here, and something you told us, is he has to want his own healing. I cannot make him. And so I think it's super normal. We always, here, if I want to build trust, if I want him to be in recovery, he's got to check these boxes right here, like we were talking about. But the truth is, like Brannon said, trust is built in these really weird, he didn't say this, but I think in weird moments that you don't think are trust building moments. And so for me, when Coby, he still does this today, where I will share like, hey, this is where my head went when you told me this, or when I saw this, even a simple phrase like, that makes sense why you would think that, and I'm sorry.
Yes.
Something that small can be like, okay, I'm not crazy. He's empathizing and validating that's my story right then. But he's also giving me space to explain and to say, help me find truth here. And I love that. But that is constant with Coby. And the cool thing is, I see
It feels really rote for me too when I'm like, that makes total sense. I got to come up with some more one-liners. It's
But
not like I'm being
it
cheesy
works though. Like I get that
but
it's
it
rote,
does make sense.
but we're doing this dance, but it works for me. And
Yeah.
it still builds trust for me. So I don't care that it's something that you automatically say. That's better for me than saying nothing or defending. So I will say this, one of the girls that I hired to run one of my groups, her husband's never done traditional therapy, but she has continued to do her own work just like you are doing. And he has kind of stepped into, she leads the way, and she's like, hey, listen to this thing I learned. And he, they'll do things together. And he sees the value in, hey, let's learn how to have boundaries around having an argument. Let's make up some rules. It's like basic things that they're doing together that he steps into instead of runs away from. And it's been this really beautiful way that they've been able to work recovery, very different, but also accept each other where they're at. Like she really loves group and therapy and the programs. And he's like, I'm going to just really do my own thing and do this with you. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think that's a really key piece on this to remember. And I do want to give props to you and your husband, but the fact that he's not ready yet, and that's how I would say it. Like he won't do, no, he's just not ready yet. He's not there yet. Recovery, and I've said this a number of times on the podcast, but recovery is willing to meet us all where we are, just like I believe God is willing to meet us all where we are. And what that means is that we live in a day and an age where information is so accessible. The cool part is it's not just information, but for us in this particular arena, it's a lot of research. It's a lot of personal experience. It can be anecdotal evidence. It can be scientifically, researched evidence that all can help us to improve as human beings and to connect. And I'll tell you, some of the stuff that your husband's probably reading is stuff that I did maybe year 2 and maybe year 3 in recovery. I can promise you this, Jessica, the fact that your husband's willing to just sit in and listen to you is something that I couldn't do probably till like year 3. I mean, I probably did, but maybe not so successfully because my tolerance for discomfort was okay, it just didn't exist. We'll just say it like that.
Oh, yes.
Because I just couldn't sit in the fact that Ashlynn was disappointed with me. I couldn't handle that. And so the fact that he's willing to be there for you, Jessica, that's so brilliant.
It's taken a lot of years too. I mean, we've gone through the same thing where it was too painful for him. Not to say that it's not painful now, but he's willing to go through that pain to help me. And for me to realize that, like, that's a huge trust builder for me to realize that he's willing to be uncomfortable so that I can get it all out respectfully, to just tell him how I'm feeling. That's been huge.
Well, I've heard you say, Brannon, that recovery work is learning to sit in discomfort, right?
Yep.
Because we're when we have the addiction, we're just avoiding and numbing with that addiction.
Yep.
And so that's a really great skill set to be mindful enough to sit in that.
Can I ask a question right down those lines, Ashlynn? So Ashlynn and I in our program Beyond Betrayal, we actually, I should say, God working through us, had us put in there many opportunities to step into pain and to process pain. And understanding that a lot of betrayal trauma recovery is about grief. It's about coming to terms with what is. And so my question for you, Jessica, is what did that look like for you as you stepped into the anger, to the sadness, to the grief of it? How did you process that, and what did it look like?
Oh gosh. Well, when I decided to do that program, Beyond Betrayal, I was really scared because I was afraid of the anger that was going to come up. I was afraid it was going to make things worse.
Your anger, is that what you mean?
My anger, and I was afraid he wasn't going to be able to handle me finally expressing it. And, but we had a long talk about, if he needed to go sleep on the couch, he would. He didn't have to, but, he was willing to do anything that I needed him to do. If I needed space, he was going to give me space. And that really helped. But as far as like sitting in the pain, the biggest thing for me was when one of the papers, one of the homework is the timeline of loss and betrayal. That one, I sat down before I started on the paper and I said, okay, God, I want you to get all of this pain out of me. Help me to remember every single thing that I've been stuffing. And the stuff that came out, I mean, I have 4 pages front and back of just different events and how it affected me and what I feel I lost from it. And I was able to just get it all out. And as soon as I was done, I felt like such a weight had been lifted.
Yeah.
And then a few days later, I was like, okay, I'm going to have him read it. And I had him read it. And it was really hard for him to read it. But I feel like in doing that, it really helped him see just how much things had impacted me and hurt me. And it's brought a lot of healing, I think, being able to just lay it all out there.
Yeah. You said that you used to just be a stuffer, like you just stuff it and just try to get through and pretend like things weren't there. And then here you are doing the opposite thing, timelining out everything, looking at it. The pathway, past something is to go through it. And good for you. Talk about courage. Not easy. And it brings up a lot of emotions. So good job, Jessica.
That's a big deal. And what would you say the impact was for him in reading your list? What was the impact on him?
I think it opened his eyes more than ever before to just how much pain his addiction had caused. Because I think for the longest time, he kind of was in denial, just as I was, of how much it was truly affecting me and affecting us.
That's a big deal. That is a really big deal, because it's interesting when in that place of denial, which I own. I mean, I've been there, got that shirt and the mug and all those things for years and years.
Got the medal.
Yeah. And I think the really interesting thing about that is that when I was there in Ashlynn, you would bring up whatever pain, whatever hurt, whatever betrayal. It was like a one-off, that my denial, that my spike narrative turning the denial, right, could easily just shoot out of the sky like I was, shooting skeet. And so my denial could handle one-off situations.
Say more about what you mean.
What I mean is the denial that the depth of denial that I was in would allow me to handle a one-off. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you looked at porn here, you acted out here. I could handle those one-off things, but that's different than sitting down and reading through a timeline of hurts, because I'm just guessing. I'm like riffing here, right, Brandon? So I'm going to need your help on this. But what I'm really surmising from this is that pretty much every person I've worked with in recovery would read a timeline like yours, Jessica, and realize, I can't battle this. I can't battle this list of pains and hurts. And maybe the only person that could would be like a narcissist or something like that. And but really though, to sit down and read that would have such deep impact. And I'm just really thankful that, Jessica, you took that assignment as seriously as you did, to the extent of not just writing it, but also having your hubs read it, because that pain, as hard as that is, and it's the worst kind of pain, to know that you've, through like just deep-seated weakness, hurt the one that you love the most. Without direct, there's indirect intention, but it's not direct. It's not rare. Was it like, I want to hurt you because work is so stressful? That's not how it plays out in the mind of the betrayer. It's not. And so to give him the gift of just really understanding, despite how much pain it causes, is awesome. And I want you to know this too, the impact of writing it for you, I'm sure, was probably so deep and meaningful, but to have him read it versus having it in a conversation, again, brilliantly done, Brannon and Ashlynn, to have it written, because a dialogue, it would be lost. Like, there's no way that I could have handled anything that was spoken like that. but to read it
Yep.
would have profound impact. I'm just so happy that you took that so seriously, and that he received it in the way that he needed to. It's that probably did way more good for him than what you'll probably ever know, simply because it's your way. It's not your way of saying, here's my list and I'm out, you jerk. It's, I love you enough to say, this is how much it hurt me, but I'm still here. That's just generous.
You know, God does not let us off the hook. And so if there's some learning there, some opportunity, we can be in some denial and be like, la-di-da, like, don't want to look at that pain over there. And what happens is that pain starts to cause us some suffering until we're able to face the reality. And when we face that reality and we sit in it and we feel it, we learn, we grow. And Jessica, I loved what you said. A weight was lifted. That is the goal. That is the goal, is for you to have the courage enough to face what is, to deal with it. And then that's when God takes it. That's when the relief comes, and it gets surrendered over, and you've learned from that thing. It's awesome to hear that you did that. Now, after that was done, everything doesn't just fall right into place. Like all of a sudden it's perfect, right? There's still work to go, right? So what are some of the things you're working on now in your marriage and in your recovery?
Well, we make it a point to talk about different things that are triggering each of us. Like if we're out and about, or even if we're home and something's on the television, or he says something. Before, we wouldn't talk about triggers. I don't really think we even realized that what a trigger was or what was happening. But just being able to have those discussions of, okay, this is triggering me, and then him saying, okay, what can I do different? And being willing to do that. Another thing is, like I mentioned before, we're listening to podcasts together, which then helps us to have conversations that maybe we wouldn't normally have. Trying to think what else. We're reading.
Can I ask you a question?
Together.
Jessica, can I ask you a question? In what ways has this betrayal and this experience of betrayal trauma pushed you to work on some of your own stuff, some of your own maybe self-worth stuff, trauma? How has it blessed your life because you've been through this experience?
It has really forced me in a way to really deal with some identity issues, and kind of being codependent with my husband, and just making me realize that I have things that I need to work on, aside from the betrayal piece of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's the uncomfortable and hard work, in my experience, is doing both together and separate. So Jessica, I have a question for you. I think we have most of the people that started in our Beyond Betrayal program. I think you were in that first wave of a group who are finishing up now. And I think you said you're on the bonus section and finishing up.
Yep.
I love hearing that you did the homework and the worksheets, because that's where like the what's my part, right? And the oomph and the hard and the uncomfortable of not just listening like we do on the podcast, but like, I'm going to do this stuff and I'm going to be the buffalo and I'm going to feel the feels and move through it. Tell me, you said, you listen to podcasts, you shared your timeline. Were you able to have those moments while doing the program? Because we definitely left the program like, this is for you. And there's opportunities to share with your spouse or partner, but it was not required because it very much is like a program just for your own healing. So did you have those moments? Did you choose to do that more than in the timeline?
Yeah, I did the program on my own. And when I got to the grief art portion, when I did the words and then I painted over the words, and that was the first piece of the program that I showed him, was the grief art. And then I was like, well, that showed a big impact on him. So maybe if I have him read the ones that I did before, the betrayal letter, the impact letter, the timeline letter, all those different ones, I decided, if I was going to invest the time and the money and to do all of that, I might as well, just lay it out on the table. What's the worst that can happen? He might get mad. He might be hurt by it, but it's like, this is the truth that I'm experiencing, and I owe it to myself and to him to be honest and be like, okay, this is it. This is what I have right now. I'm willing to work for something better, but this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you said something that hit me, because I feel like I wasted a lot of time. I was investing in myself and trying to get better, and then I was withholding so much because I was whatever it was, my ego, my pride. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I don't know, like all the things, but I was feeling a lot of things about where I was at that I didn't open up that piece of me. So I love hearing you say, I felt this, I invested in, so I just decided, why not? What do I have to lose at this point? So, can I ask one more question on that? How did you justify investing in yourself after years of just like pushing all that pain down? What made you shift that idea?
Well, I felt like I was just at a point where I was just ready. I was ready for me to feel better, regardless of what he did, regardless of whether or not he got help. And I realized that for so many years, I had spent so much time and so much energy looking for resources and help for him, but I didn't look for anything to help me. I didn't know to. I didn't know how it was impacting me until just, since April or May is when it finally dawned on me of how much it was impacting me and that I needed to find healing, regardless of what he decided.
Man, that 100% me too. There you go. Me too. I was very much I found this information for you. Hey, did you know this? Let me tell you the science behind addiction. He's like, oh,
And that was always exactly. That was always such a conversation of tension, and it never ended well. And we may have had a few conversations that went okay, but for the most part, it's like, enough already.
Jessica, can you share a couple more takeaways that you have had thus far in the program Beyond Betrayal that you're doing? I'm just curious as to what else really hit you front and center. What had impact? What do you recall that was like, okay, that was really important to me? There's a lot of material in there, but anything off the top of your head that you're just like, oh yeah, that was really cool. I liked this.
Well, talking about the triggers really helped. It helped me to recognize them, but then also the letter to God or your higher power. I wrote my letter to God, and I thought when I started it that it was going to be this gripe session, that I was going to be. I thought I was going to write it. I went into thinking I was going to write it being mad at God, for this whole situation, and we're here again, but it turned into this letter of thankfulness for all the things, all the resources that he brought to me so that I could get some healing. I still have a long way to go, a long, long way to go, but I just through writing that letter, I was able to see how God had put things in my path and guided me to things that would not only help me, but would help my husband. And it was things that my husband would be open to, like hearing another man instead of a woman. It's been huge on your guys' podcast. You know, it's been really special to see him impacted just as much as I am through hearing your story.
Jessica, you say you have a long way to go, but I want to say that you've done some of the hardest work already. And you know, I just really admire I admire a lot about you in terms of you followed through, you did the homework, you've experienced some healing. And my question for you is, you know, like I did an intake today, a woman who found out everything a month ago, and just her whole world just crashed and burned a month ago. I talked to other women who know their husbands are addicted, but they're in denial about it and they don't want to deal with it. And they, you know, they're just not, they don't want to face it. If you could say something to those women struggling, what advice would you give? What would you say?
I wish I would have taken it seriously sooner. I wish I wouldn't have tried to bury it and explain it away. And I feel like it caused more damage doing that to both of us and to our relationship. But it's worth the heartache. It's worth the hard conversations. It's worth the tears. It's worth being mad at each other. I mean, there was a lot of nights that we went to bed and he was on one side of the bed and I was on the other side of the bed, and we were both crying because we're just like so broken and didn't know how to fix it.
Man, I can so identify with that. Sorry, Brandon, but I'm like,
fine.
wow, we have so been there. And trust me when I say, Jessica, that you and your husband are not alone in those nights. And it's interesting, right? In those nights when we're on the other side, opposite sides of the bed, and just dying inside with facing the pain, as much as that's just so devastating and so painful, it's the thing that I never did, right? It's the thing that I never gave myself permission to do. It's never the thing that I knew I ought to do, which is to face the hard things, because I was so good at numbing the hard things. So, man, there's so much good in this. And I appreciate the insight that you've shared as far as the piece of advice for those who've been betrayed. So I'm going to ask you, what would be your piece of advice based upon your experience with your hubs? What would be the piece of advice you'd give to the person who has betrayed, who is in that place where they're just battling, they're listening right now? What would you share with them, the person who has betrayed?
I would just say be open to just listening. Even if it's something that's really hard to hear. You know, no one wants to hear how they've screwed up, how they've hurt their partner. But giving your partner that space to cry, and giving that space for your partner to just fall apart in your arms and not take it personal. I mean, that's been the one thing that has really helped my husband and I, is he's been understanding in those moments where I'm just like, I'm getting triggered left and right. I like, like, this is hard. And he is sincerely sorry and broken over it just as much as I am. And for the husband that wants to change, or for the spouse that wants to change, wants to make things better, that's a first step, to just listen, not say anything, not defend yourself, but just listen.
That's beautiful.
I love that.
That's beautiful. Well said.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for giving a voice to the world and to being able to say, hey, my story's a little different and there's still hope and there's still success in the way that you guys are doing this. And I love that. And I appreciate your vulnerability today in being here with us.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
Can't thank you enough. Thank you so much.
And
Thank
thanks to
you,
your
guys.
husband.
Yeah. I know this was a choice that both of you made to have you share like this. And
Yeah.
it is always the courageous decisions that are super vulnerable that have such great impact. So trust me when I say
I was hesitant, and it was him that was like, you need to share,
Oh,
this
good for
might
him.
help someone. and and like, I'm like, are you sure?
Good for him.
But I think my hesitancy has been, I've carried my own shame over this,
Yep.
feeling alone, because I haven't really shared this with a lot of people in my life, because it's isolating, and you do feel shame over it, like it's your fault,
Oh, yeah.
and that you're not enough, and how are people going to view you if they knew your husband struggles with that. So I can't thank you guys enough for allowing me to come on here, because I feel like it's given me just another layer of healing, just accepting that I'm not alone, and that I can embrace where we're at now, and embrace where we've been.
Thank you. Thank you. And you speak a lot of truth, and I appreciate that voice because it's important for us to hear from other people, and you've done it. So thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
I am going to end with a announcement of some sort. If you head over to beyond-enough.com/Black Friday, we're bringing back Beyond Enough. We closed that program down when we launched it and let the group finish it up. We're bringing it back. We've had a lot of people saying, well, why isn't it available right now? So we're bringing a big sale for all of our programs. So whether you're looking for something to do as a couple or on your own, or just something fun, we have our 30-day challenge that will also be on sale. It's $1 a day. So head over there. I think the site will be live when this podcast comes out, but it's beyond-enough.com/Black Friday. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah, big high fives
Thanks.
to you. And I want to just give your husband a big hug and just say, keep on, brother. That's awesome. Thanks
He would love
for
that.
being here. Yeah. Thanks, guys.